Today, I'm thrilled to bring to you this exclusive Outstanding Screenplays interview with a screenwriter, producer, writing coach, and now also a feature film director, Erik Bork. He's best known for his work on the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers and From the Earth to the Moon, for which he wrote multiple episodes and won 2 Emmy and 2 Golden Globe Awards. He's also the author of the best-selling book, The Idea, The 7 Elements of a Viable Story for Screen, Stage, or Fiction, and has sold original pilots and feature scripts to HBO, NBC, Fox, and many more. Erik has been a judge and mentor for Outstanding Screenplays TV pilot competition for the past few years, and today we'll be discussing not only his approach to storytelling, but also his advice on crafting a compelling TV pilot. Welcome, Erik. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with Outstanding Screenplays today.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So, Erik, I'm going to start with your origins story of how you got into this industry. So we'll start at the beginning. You're still best known for your work on Band of Brothers and From the Earth to the Moon as part of the producing team alongside Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg. Can you take us back to the beginning? How did those collaborations come about? And how did it all lead to your involvement in these incredible productions?
Well, it was a bit of a fairy tale, to be honest, how I got there. I started as an assistant. I had moved to Los Angeles from Ohio, where I grew up and went to film school, and I started temping in different offices at the Fox studios, just being a phone answerer and kind of lowly sort of desk sitter outside someone's office. And eventually that led to an assignment for Tom Hanks's production company, which turned into like a permanent assistant position that I worked at for a couple of years. And was writing on the side, and eventually managed to land a kind of junior agent with a couple of comedy scripts I'd written, spec sample scripts for existing sitcoms, which you would write as a writing sample. Friends and Frasier, I wrote episodes of, and my agent was sending them out, and I was thinking I was going to get a job, hopefully writing on staff on a sitcom. I was really focused on comedy, and eventually Tom Hanks read a couple of those scripts because someone else in the office had suggested that, he would read them and whatever. I don't know how that came about. Kind of a miracle. I knew it wasn't for me to ask him to do it. And he read them and liked them and decided I had talent as a writer, and then offered me this amazing promotion where instead of being an assistant, I would be kind of like a junior development person at his company. And the initial task was to help him with this miniseries From the Earth to the Moon about the Apollo space program, which he had sold to HBO and was going to executive produce, his first big thing as a producer ever. And so he asked me to help find writers for the scripts, but also help him craft a kind of outline or Bible for the series that the potential writers would look at, and that would be kind of the basis for our approach to how we're doing it. So I did that. And then over time, that expanded into me being asked to write one of the scripts myself. And then I got to kind of be an apprentice producer really on the entire series and be there for every aspect of it. And as we brought in other people to kind of run the show from day to day, one of whom became my key mentor, Tony Toe, who was the co-executive producer on it. And so I ended up getting to write multiple scripts and be a co-producer on the whole thing, and just be kind of like part of the brain trust, as Tom would call it, on that series. And then a couple years later, he decided to do Band of Brothers with Steven Spielberg. They had made Saving Private Ryan, and were interested in different Stephen Ambrose books, and they chose Band of Brothers. And Tom asked me to kind of play a similar role, and he got some of the same people back together, some of the same producer, writer, director people, to do Band of Brothers, which similarly, I was a producer on all of it, supervising producer level credit, and a writer on some of the episodes, and uncredited rewriter on some of the episodes as well.
And reflecting back on that early journey through that whole process that led you to the Emmys, is there anything that writers, particularly emerging writers, can take from that experience? Any pieces of advice that you'd give them, especially looking to break into this industry?
Well, I mean, I can't discount the fact that I moved to Los Angeles and started working as an assistant, and eventually found my way to somebody who could really help me. I mean, and then once I got there, I didn't ask them to help me. I just tried to do a good job, but kept working on my stuff on the side. So, there is an advantage to living in LA. I think a lot of people who eventually make it as screenwriters not only lived in LA, but worked in the industry, ideally as an assistant around writers or producers sometimes agents or executives, but, to be part of that world, partly to make contacts of people above you that can help you, but also people at your own level who you can sort of help each other. And the way I got my first agent was through another assistant I'd worked with on a TV show before I worked for Tom, a show called Picket Fences that David Kelly created. She got an agent and was willing to show my script to her agent, and that's who signed me. And so stuff like that is really invaluable. I mean, you have to have the ability, but having those kind of contacts and also just being around the process on a professional level and reading scripts and seeing how it works, it just becomes sort of more real to you. So, but barring that, some of the same principles still apply, which is to, just keep at it, even if you're only writing an hour a day or whatever, to learn as much as you can, get feedback from people who really know something, and focus on growing. And it's a long haul, and it's not going to happen overnight typically. And when you do make contacts, try to be of value to those people and be a friendly, helpful person more than a taker, which we all want to take. We all want to get something, but usually you have to kind of put that on a back burner and let it be their idea.
And if we look at starting before a writer sits down to do anything, I love that you have an entire framework for the idea. So I'd love to speak on your book. And in your book, The Idea, which, by the way, all writers that submit their TV pilot into the TV pilot competition will get for free. So in your book, you stress the importance of testing the idea before you start writing, and potentially wasting months writing and then realizing that maybe the issue is in the actual idea, the idea not being good enough. So I'd love you to tell us why you decided to write the book, maybe what gave you the idea to write the idea, and then also if you can explain shortly each of the 7 elements that constitute an idea.
Yeah. Well, I started working as a script consultant and teacher of screenwriting years back. And what I noticed is when I read someone's script, 99% of the notes I had that were important, the most important notes. I mean, there's some notes about just how well you execute on the page, how well you write scenes and stuff, but and characters. But most of it, the vast majority of what was important were notes I would have had on the idea if they just pitched it to me before they started writing. And that happened on basically every script. And I also learned in my own career that, things move forward usually because there's an idea that really works on a very brief log line, synopsis, short pitch kind of level. And so, I mean, that really got drummed into me. So I started just noticing that I think writers, and I've done this too, want to rush to writing the script as soon as possible. They tend to race past the idea process and they just start getting into structure and beat sheets and outlines and scenes. Rather than taking the time to really vet the idea. Save the Cat, the Blake Snyder book, he talks about how he would go up to strangers in coffee shops and say, would you see this movie, which most of us introvert writers would never do. But there is a need to understand what makes a viable idea and to not spend too much time, as you said, on ones that aren't viable. And it's not easy to come up with one that is, because it has to work on a lot of different levels. But I kind of, for the book, came up with an acronym of 7 items which add up to the word problem, because every story, in my view, is about a problem that someone's trying to solve. Now, you have more than one story within a movie or within a TV episode or series, but at its core, to me, a story is about a main character who has something they're trying to achieve, and there's something big in the way, and it really matters. And so the 7 elements that add to problem, number 1 is punishing, which is it's difficult for them to solve, and they're punished by trying to solve it. And it gets worse usually throughout the middle of the story. Whatever it is they're trying to do, it doesn't get better, it gets worse. R is for relatable, which is about relating to the main character. You want the audience to emotionally invest in and almost become the main character in terms of their subjective experience of what's going on, feel what they're feeling, want what they're wanting, whether they're fully likable or just compelling because we identify with their particular problem. That's an important thing. Original, PRO, the O is for original, which is you want to be original in some way. You obviously don't want to just completely copy or repeat things that seem overly familiar. You want to have some authenticity, something that's unique to you. But at the same time, writers tend to often make the mistake of overvaluing originality and ignoring some of these other precepts because they think all that matters is I do something that's totally different, which isn't the case, because much of what works is repeating things that others have done well and adding some originality rather than trying to start from nothing and, you do just whatever you want. There's more constraints than you might think on what makes something viable as a project that's worth writing, in my view. So the B is believable, which is often ignored because, there's so many projects where there are things that are fantastical going on or a little bit unbelievable for the sake of entertainment or for the sake of a punishing story, but you can go too far with that very easily and lose the audience. Like if you're writing a comedy and the things characters are doing and saying don't feel like real people would do or say them, like if they just feel too over the top, you lose the audience completely. So there's a level of believability and kind of just authentic realism that's really important. And when you can get, usually the best scripts have a vivid realness to them, even if there's something magical about the world, like it's a zombie apocalypse or something, the realness of the scene by scene and character stuff that's happening usually needs to be very high to compensate for the fact that you're asking the audience to buy into this one big thing like zombies, for instance, and try not to combine too many unbelievable elements or ones that have a lot of rules that seem arbitrary or hard to understand if you're the audience. L is for life altering, which means the stakes have to be very high. If not life or death, then seeming like life or death importance to the people involved. E is for entertaining, which means bringing audiences to desired emotional states that fit a certain genre, which a lot of times writers kind of forget or ignore that as well, that you're writing, really selling something is a lot about, people are going to want to escape into what it is that you're offering. It's not just a quote good story, it's fun to watch the story, fun to read the story for the reader. So there's an element to that where writers really are entertainers. And that may sound very trivial, but it's a big part of what we're doing. And we get paid to do it. And when people spend a lot of money to produce our work, it's usually because it seems like it has a clear ability to entertain millions of people, whether it's a comedy that's really funny, a thriller that's really scary, an action thing that's got great action, whatever. The last one, M, is meaningful, which is just about theme and about the work being about something bigger than the surface plot, something that maybe sticks to your ribs more, that makes you think about something. Maybe there's some sort of message, although writers need to be careful not to write scripts simply because they want to convince the world that climate change is real or something like that. Like those kind of argument movies usually aren't compelling in those other 6 ways. So I usually tell writers, theme can emerge over the course of writing. You may not fully know the themes, maybe unconsciously, but not consciously when you start out. Don't worry about it. Write a great story and let theme emerge over time. And usually theme is more kind of weighing competing values against each other as opposed to just making a simplistic statement about like racism is bad. Like that's not a theme. Or fatherhood is not a theme. A theme is more something like, loyalty to your family versus loyalty to yourself. Those are 2 competing goods. How do you, like The Godfather explores that, for instance. So interesting, rich things that don't have easy answers. So some meaning that, you wrote this for a reason and you put yourself into it and only you could have written it the way you wrote it. That all comes out in the kind of meaningfulness part. And so these 7 elements, some successful movies or scripts or TV shows over-index on certain ones and aren't as strong on other ones, but most of them kind of can sort of pass the checkmark test on all 7 of those. In my opinion, the ones that are good and stand the test of time and get produced and have big appreciative audiences.
And when it comes to a writer making something feel believable or feel real, even if they were, say, dealing with more of a fantastical world, is that something a writer needs to think about? Do they achieve that from sort of really knowing a character and their motives, or is it more just in the research, general research?
It's both, and it's just making sure that your characters are behaving in ways that real people in that situation or that real person in that situation would behave. So you want the character to feel like a real human being to the audience, and you want to have everything they do and say feel like, yes, I buy that they would do and say that. Don't just put things in because you think it would be cool, or because you think it would be entertaining, or because it would, you need them to say something to give the audience information. Try to let your characters become, three-dimensional sentient beings who are behaving in kind of like a logical way given their circumstances. And so if you have a fantastical element of some kind, I usually say limit it to one. And ideally, it's one that's easy for the audience to grasp, maybe because they've seen it before, like it's vampires, but with one little twist on vampires, let's say. Or it's aliens, but one special twist we haven't seen before on aliens, as opposed to creating something so incomprehensible that it's hard to explain, it's hard to understand. Because if the reader, whether it's a log line or a pitch or a full script, isn't understanding the rules of the world of your script, or can't buy into it easily, you've got a problem. And they need to be able to do that in the first act, even the first 10 pages, to be able to go, okay, here's how this world is different from the world we live in 2025. And I get exactly how it's different. And I'm comfortable enough with that to say, great, tell me a story in that world. But the story better have very believable, relatable people behaving in a logical manner, because at the end of the day, that's what we relate to and want to see. You might be in an extraordinary situation as a character, but you're a normal person otherwise who we can sort of identify with.
So once a writer's got a really solid idea, the next really important process is the outlining. I'd love to know what your outlining process looks like. Do you use index cards? Do you break it down scene by scene? And how detailed do you get before you know it's time to then move on and write? What is it a writer that should be looking to do exactly in this outline process? And
Yeah.
I know everyone's writing process can be different. Is it outlining something you recommend for every single writer?
I do, but some people, for some reason, it might not work for them, because you're right, everyone is different. But I think for screenwriting, generally speaking, outlining is needed, because it's like a structural medium. You can't just sort of like go and explore and see where it goes. I mean, you can, but you'll probably write something really long and formless that will have to be massively rethought, which maybe that's good, but I think most professionals outline, and different people do it differently. But for me, I don't mind the process, save the cat outlines, where first you have the log line, and maybe you expand that into a single page synopsis, which is a good tool for pitching an idea as well, and like queries and emails and stuff, to have a one-page version that just gives the basic kind of 30,000-foot view of the story. And then his beat sheet with the 15 points and the 3-act structure, I think, is useful, and that usually ends up being about 4 pages. So I don't necessarily myself now do it in a like very rigid, disciplined, exact way. But as far as basic guidelines, I think that's helpful, expanding and using those ideas about structure, and then going to scene by scene outline. For me, I don't do cards on a board. I just do kind of paragraphs in a document, where each scene is a paragraph initially, and and that might be 3 scenes on a page, 4 scenes on a page, and 10, 12, 15 pages total, to get like the 40 scenes that Save the Cat talks about in a feature film. I think that's a decent method. And then, you think you have the scenes outlined, and you sit down to write, and then invariably what you find is, oh, I don't know enough about the scene yet. I thought I did, but I need to know more, or this outline isn't working in some way. And so there's always a rethinking and a 2 steps forward, 1 step back process. Like it never works the same in any 2 scripts. So you always get a little bit lost in the process, I find. But as a general rule, I do it that way. And but it's kind of like the layers of the onion. Like you're shaping and reshaping and reshaping and reshaping and reshaping a lot. And I think the thing that writers tend to not realize when they're starting out is it's not just reshaping the words on the page, the scripted scenes, the dialogue and description. That's the very tip of the iceberg. That's like the last 10% of the process. The bulk of the work, Robert McKee talks about this in his book Story, is not just the pre-planning of the scenes, but your knowledge of the world and the characters that's beyond the scenes. It's like the writer is like creating a world and has to like know way more than just what's going to be in those scenes. And you can sort of tell when you read a script where the writer only knows the limit of their knowledge is what's on the page. It just isn't going to feel as real or as thought through or as vivid or as compelling or rich. So there's a lot of just like figuring out stuff, deepening your, and even after I write a draft, a lot of times I'm like, well, it's a decent draft, but I feel like my characters are just kind of pawns of a story that I made up, and they have like one thing that they sort of do over and over, and it's kind of boring, or I drafted to the best of my ability some of these scenes and events based on my knowledge of the world that the story takes place in, but it needs to be better. And so you go back and you like figure out the characters in a deeper way, or you come up with ideas for casting that would be models for who those characters are. You research more, which ChatGPT, we might get to this later, is a helpful tool for that, I've found lately. So it's not a straight line linear process, but there are certain steps that I think are helpful for most writers to use along the way.
And you talk about the importance of conflict in each scene. Can you define exactly what conflict is? I think especially for new writers, sometimes we can have the perception that conflict can mean fighting or arguing, but it'd be great to hear from you how you define conflict, and how a writer, if they do get the note, it can be quite a common note that perhaps there isn't enough conflict in the script. How would a writer, if they get this note, be looking to fix that?
To me, conflict means someone wants something and there's something in the way and they're trying to get it. And the audience knows what that is and can relate to it. So we're watching from scene to scene as a character, typically our one main character in a movie, although again, you can have multiple stories with different main characters intertwined within one episode or one movie. But the most simple way to talk about it is you have a main character in your story who's got some goal. And in a typical scene, the reason there's conflict is they're trying to move toward their goal or solve their big problem, or both. It's kind of two sides of the same coin, right? They have a big problem they're trying to solve and or a big goal they're trying to reach, but there's a lot of difficulty, punishing difficulty in the way of that. So ideally, we enter each scene knowing what the main character's like status is of their goals and plans and intentions. We know what they want and why they want it and what they're feeling and what they're doing to try to get it. So then when we start the scene, we're like, okay, let's see how this goes. Are they going to be able to do this or not? It's fun to watch them try to do it. And inevitably, Aaron Sorkin talks about intention and obstacle. They're going to have their intention and they're going to meet some obstacle. Somewhat expected, but somewhat unexpected, ideally, in a good scene. So now they're trying to get through this obstacle and it's not going as they hoped it would. They have to improvise on the spot. And by the end of the scene, they didn't get exactly what they wanted, but but something happened that moves the story forward. Something happened that changed the game in some way. But it's really, conflict is about seeing story and scene writing as a subjective experience of a character striving in a direction that we care about, that's difficult and important, and they're active in doing that. But there's a lot in the way of that they keep having to move through or trying to move through.
So I want to move on to the mechanics of writing, and in particularly your own writing process. So what is your writing process? How often do you write? Where do you write? Do you have a writing ritual at all? Do you write on one project solely, or do you have many projects on the go? So yeah, I'd like to hear about that.
Well, in recent years, the way I've done it is I like to have 3 projects going at once, but I'm not working on any more than one of them at a time. So what I mean by that is I'll spend maybe 3 months, and I try to give myself 6 months and no more for a project to get to a point where I would show it to people. They may not be continuous 6 months though, because what I tend to do is I'll work on it until I have a draft that I feel is decent enough that I want to like put it down and I don't have more to do on it right now. That might take 3 months, 4 months. And so I'll do that and I'll just kind of put it aside, not look at it for a couple of months. Then I'll turn to one of the other projects or coming up with a new idea for the next one if I need to. But like either one that's already been put in a drawer and I'm pulling it out again, or a brand new one. And I'll do the same process. And then eventually I always come back to the other ones and then I'll rewrite. So a project will have a couple, 2 or 3 phases where I'm actively working on it that may be 6 months total, but maybe 12 months or longer before it gets from beginning to that point where, okay, I'm going to show it to people now. I'm going to do a staged Zoom reading with actors, or I'm going to do something to get feedback or like put it out into the world. But that's really crucial, getting away from it and coming back, because when you come back, you have fresh eyes, you have fresh perspective, and you're able to give yourself notes. Like you see the flaws. I do rely on myself a lot for giving myself feedback. I've gotten to a point in my career where I feel like most of the time that's what I most need, although there are certainly times where I want others feedback. And as far as my like daily process, I mean, I just recommend writing every day, even if it's an hour a day. And sometimes it is only an hour for me, but that can be very productive. I usually keep it the same rough time each day in the same place. I just write in a home office. I've had periods where I would write in a coffee shop, with earplugs in, but mostly a good home office for me. And it's just good to know what your next task is on any given day and be clear about it, and know so that you're breaking the work down into manageable chunks that hopefully within an hour you can really make some real progress. And lately, even on weekends, I try to check in on my current script, even on Saturdays and Sundays, because what I found otherwise is Mondays is such a cold start after 2 days that I'm like, oh, it's a slog. So even if I'm just like, I'm just going to reread what I did yesterday, or reread what my notes were that I need to work on next, and then maybe spend 20 minutes. I make it very chill. And I've learned that making it chill is really helpful. Having a mind, on one hand, you have to show up and have the discipline to show up. But on the other hand, creativity flows best when you're really chill, when you're relaxed and playful. You're not hard on yourself. There's a place for reading something with a critical eye, but a bigger part of the creative process, in my view, requires suspending the critical eye and being more open and curious and non-judgmental, and trying to make it fun, trying to make it light, trying to make it like, I'm just going to do this small little thing. It's not some big thing, because so much of it is like getting your mind in the right space where creative things start to flow. And they don't flow when you're in an analytical space, which is how most of us spend most of our time. Business oriented, got to get things done, got to get this many pages written, that kind of mindset. So it's like, I think that's part of why people avoid writing, is that it can be hard to get yourself into that space. It's like we have two parts of us, and the part that's creative is not in charge a lot of the time, So a lot of it's really the psychological game of it, to be honest. But having a certain thing of like, this hour is for writing and I do it every day is also good to have as a discipline, I think.
And you touched on that there, but I'd like to know your thoughts on the pain of writing. And sometimes writers can experience, I guess, what's known as writer's block. What would be your suggestions on how to combat that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I think you just have to write through it. And by write through it, I don't mean write scenes necessarily, because again, 90% of the process of writing, or some huge percentage, is not writing scenes. It's not writing dialogue and description. It's moving forward creatively in whatever it is you're doing, whatever that looks like. So I usually have some kind of Word document that is just a notes document that I'm always like talking to myself in that document, or walking around and like recording the important things, or driving or whatever. And so, block means you don't know what to write next. You don't know where to go or how to solve a certain problem. And you probably have a spiraling self-hatred about the whole thing and about the project that makes it worse. And so you just have to like roll up your sleeves and be practical and say, well, what's really the thing I'm concerned about? Like, what's really the problem here? What's not working, or what do I need solved? Because the mind will come up with solutions if it's given the right prompt, and if you do it with the right state of mind, or if you're receptive with the right state of mind. But a lot of it's just talking through or typing through, whatever it is. So there's never like a blank page, because the page in my Word document is just me, like almost like journaling randomly to myself. It's like, so there's no reason why that ever stops. Because even if you're saying, I hate everything I'm writing, this is a stupid idea, why did I think this would be good? The only thing I like about it is this. But even if you're doing that, you're moving forward in some way. You're moving through whatever you're thinking and feeling, or, I mean, you don't want to stay in a spiral and go further down into a doom spiral about it. But you can move through it and be honest with what's happening. And then just at a certain point, you're like, okay, where I'm really at right now is this next scene. I don't know how to get into this scene because blah, 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 blah. So a lot of times you have to go, okay, let me get out of the preconceptions that I had that I couldn't find an answer for. What are some other ways? Just start brainstorming, just random possibilities that I hadn't thought of before. There may be some bigger reason why this isn't working that I haven't thought of. And so just be willing to take a step back.
So you're a judge for Outstanding Screenplays TV pilot competition. So I really want to get into talking to you about all the process around that might differ as well for writing a TV pilot, and all your advice for writers on when they're considering writing a TV pilot. So you've judged and read scripts from our Outstanding Screenplays TV pilot competition for the past few years. What has stood out to you most about the scripts you've read? Were there any particular trends you noticed among the submissions, either positive or negative?
I mean, it's mostly very positive, and part of it is that I'm reading like the finalists. So I'm reading the ones that have gotten all the way to the end. So they're always really good scripts. They're always like professional level scripts by the time they get to me. And there's not a huge difference between, if I read 5, between like the one I think is the top and the one at the bottom or whatever. They're all like very similar in terms of quality, and they all have like certain pros and cons that I have to decide and kind of vote on. But I would say that the ones that get that far, the positives are usually they're very vivid. In other words, they take you on a journey into a world of characters and situations that becomes kind of consuming. Like they pull you into something, they pull you out of your world and into something that feels real, feels thought through, and that has something compelling going on dramatically. Some challenge, some problem, some character in a situation that has high stakes and is difficult, and they're focused on, and we get caught up in it. You know, that's some of the just kind of like basics that I talk about in my book. It's sort of like they're usually doing those things pretty well, and it feels like they feel polished, and they feel like they feel like there's not big holes where the writer hasn't thought of stuff. It feels like you're in good hands with this writer. They've really thought it all through. They've probably rewritten it quite a bit, and they've like polished it down to an essence that has a strong dramatic element to it, and there's something about it that's original or memorable that I haven't exactly seen before. As far as things that sometimes writers fall into that are difficult or that get in the way, and this is every writer can fall into this stuff. A lot of times, I mean, things have changed in the industry a little bit over time, where nowadays the industry really likes original pilots as writing samples. It used to be that they didn't as much. So as a writing sample, it means you're just trying to like get signed with it. You're probably not going to ever sell it. You just want it to be a strong script. But even given that, I would say think about the series beyond the pilot and try to avoid the pilot being just a prologue to a series. In other words, a lot of pilots, by the end of the pilot, you're just getting the characters together into the situation that the rest of the series is going to be about, which means every other episode is going to be radically different from this one because now they're in this new situation. What I think is better is to get them in the situation in the first half of the pilot and spend the rest of the pilot telling a story in that situation that is going to be representative of what typical episodes will have. I think Breaking Bad is a great example of this, where it takes a while for Walter White to decide he's going to start cooking meth with Jesse and doing it for the first time and having their first deal. But it happens in the pilot, and it happens about, I think, halfway through the pilot. So the second half of that pilot, you get to see what his new life's going to be. I mean, they even kill a guy, and they even get chased by the car. You know, they have battle for their lives with other drug guys. Like all the kind of stuff that show is going to be about is happening in the pilot. So by the end of that pilot, we're like, okay, we're going to see a lot more of this. As opposed to if at the end of the pilot, he and Jesse shook hands for the first time and they're like, tomorrow we're going to cook our first batch. Then it's just like a prologue. We haven't really seen the show yet. So I think it's almost always better to get us into it faster, which usually means less time setting stuff up in the ordinary world than you think. Pilots can hold a lot more story than people think, a lot more. And a lot of times in my professional experience writing pilots, because I've written quite a few where I like sold a pitch or whatever and wrote the pilot, even if it didn't get produced, and got notes from the network and all that. So much of it is about packing more and more story into the pilot. So the other thing is that there are shows that successfully do this, but they're rare. People sometimes come to pilots with a feature mindset where it's a single character with a single problem and a single story. And almost every series has multiple main characters, and it's ensemble storytelling where you have multiple characters that get stories. Even in, I mean, the Breaking Bad pilot is mostly just one story from Walter White's perspective, I'll grant you. And I know that that's a shining model, which I use myself for a lot of people. But once you get into the series, Jesse gets his own stories, Skylar gets her own stories, you know. You almost always have at least 3 characters that are getting stories from week to week on any show. So knowing in advance who those people are and writing a pilot that even if those other people don't get their own stories, there's enough there that we can see the world from their point of view too. It's not just a single main character. And the other thing is just the believability. Like, so many scripts fall down because they're trying too hard to be so original or so crazy or so high concept. It's about believability and emotional resonance. Like, you want to make the reader care about someone or something. You're not just trying to write something that's like got a shiny, impressive sheen to it. You're trying to move people in some way. You're trying to make them laugh, make them care, make them feel something, you know, make them on the edge of their seat, it's figuratively, etc. So looking to make that emotional connection is the other really key thing.
That's a really smart structure recommendation. If the TV pilot sort of followed that, would they still be looking to submit an entire Bible with that, or a pitch deck, or is that sort of well-structured pilot enough where you really get a sense of what the entire season would be?
I mean, I don't really have my finger on the pulse of that right now, like what agents and managers and Netflix executives and producers or whatever are always demanding, but I think it can vary. But I think traditionally a pilot script should be able to wow people on its own, but you're probably going to have to pitch it first. You're probably going to have to pitch the series, which means pitching not just the pilot, but the series, right? The overall series. But a Bible, like in my experience, a Bible is for later. You know, I mean, some people might want to see a pitch deck before they want to see a script, but I think most of the time for professionals, it's a verbal pitch or it's a script. There's nothing like else in between or nothing else needed. Now, if you're not a professional and you don't have the ability to get in the room and do a verbal pitch, then it's probably just a script, but you probably have like a 1-page pitch that could be in a query email or something that you would send to somebody, a log line and a 1-page pitch, and then the script. Certainly you need to think through the series and you need to be ready with supporting documents about the series to send people, but usually 1 page should do it. And if that page doesn't do it, you've got a problem. 5 pages won't fix it if 1 page wouldn't do it. There's a real art to the 1 page, here's what my show or my movie is. And people are like, well, I can't cram it all into 1 page. Well, you shouldn't be cramming. A 1-pager isn't about condensing a script into a page. It's about pitching an idea for a movie. Like, you're telling someone, here's what happens in this movie. Here's what happens in this series. You have to learn how to like zoom way out from the specifics of your storytelling, which is something writers really can struggle with. Because we all get caught up in the details of, well, in this scene, this happens. And later in the script, they're going to find out this, blah, 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 blah. No one wants to hear that. They just want to first know, well, what's the basic overview? Writers often have a very hard time thinking in terms of and communicating in terms of a basic overview. And that's a really important skill.
Are there any specific essential things you like to see in the first page or the first 10 pages that will keep you engaged?
Well, I think in the first 10 pages, my view is let's again just talk about, let's say it's a movie with a single main character, because if you have multiple characters, you're going to like do this for multiple people, multiple main characters with their own story. But if it's a single, let's just like use Breaking Bad or use a feature film that has a single main character. You start off, you're introducing the audience to that character's life, their status quo life as it is before any big major change happens. And that takes some time. Michael Haig in Writing Screenplays itself talks about seducing the audience to caring about the main character. I think that's a great term. It's not about grab them by the throat on the first page with a framing device where something horrible is happening. Sometimes that works. Breaking Bad certainly has a great one. But after you get past the framing device, or if you don't have one at all, again, I guess we're going to just use Breaking Bad for everything on this call. Breaking Bad like once we get past the framing device, it takes its time showing us what Walter White's status quo life is: his marriage, his work, his second job, his health situation, his, wife, kid, friends, social life. Like we really take our time to get to know what his world is before some big thing happens, before he gets the diagnosis, and certainly before he decides to go do the new thing he's going to do with the meth. So to me, the first 10 pages make us care about the main character, which first means make us understand the most important basic things about their life. Who are they? What do they do each day? What are their hopes and dreams? What are their conflicts? What are their 6 things that need fixing? Save the Cat talks about. Help us get a sense of what they want and can't have in their normal life, where things are falling short. So that by page 10 or 12, we feel like we get who this person is, and we sympathize, we connect, and we relate in some way. And then bam, a catalyst happens. So a mistake people tend to make is they think in setting up the world, you want to jump around and show all these different characters in the first 10 pages. I think that's a huge mistake. You usually want to tell a subjective story from the point of view of that one main character. Again, there are times where you have more than one and you have to go back and forth between them, but it's still the same principle. Subjective storytelling, getting us invested in a particular character, their view of the world, their situation in the world, so that we have a reason to root for someone or something. We have some kind of investment in what's going on. When you jump around to other characters who we aren't immersing in their world because they're not really a main character, you're just like kind of wasting time that could be spent hooking people. And I think you hook people mostly through that emotional connection as opposed to a big action scene or whatever. Although sometimes you can have that. But I think people tend to think, oh, the first 3 pages have to be some big crazy scene all the time. And most of the time when I read those, I'm like, I don't think it works. I think it's not worth doing because it doesn't do what the thing you're trying to make it do. And it just distracts from the real goal, which is help us understand and care about somebody that we're going to be following for moving forward from here.
And when you're giving feedback on TV pilots, is there any key element you like to focus on with feedback, be it concept, structure, character development, or is it a combination of all of these?
Yeah, it's a combination. I mean, but it kind of starts with the basics of like what I mentioned that my book is about, where, you have a character with a problem / goal that hopefully the audience cares about, that hopefully feels like it has high enough stakes, high enough difficulty. They're actively pursuing it. It makes sense. It feels believable, and it's entertaining to watch. So I'm kind of looking for those same things in a pilot. There may be more than one character that has a story that needs to do those things, but I'm really looking for, is the basic situation this character is in that you're introducing me to feel like it rises to those levels? And the dialogue and the description, how the scenes appear on the page, are all in service to that. And certainly you want those to be professional level. And there's all kinds of things you can say about what makes good description and good dialogue. But again, that's the tip of the iceberg. It's the underlying stuff that's what's most important, and that often has issues that writers aren't realizing. And then they get all obsessed with just the dialogue and description. But let's take a step back. What do they want? Why do they want it? What does the audience understand? What are you trying to get the audience to feel about this character? Does this all make sense? Is it a big enough problem? Are they active enough in pursuing it? Are there big enough obstacles? Are the stakes high enough? Is it fun to watch? Does it fit a genre that, like, is it really a funny comedy, or is it really a really intriguing mystery, whatever the genre is? So it's kind of like those basic elements are like what's all important to me. And does the concept feel like it's clear and there's some kind of hook to that concept that is intriguing and memorable? It's a lot to try and do, but that's what I'm basically looking at.
And writers can be sensitive to feedback. It's sometimes a little bit tough. What's your advice to writers so that they can be open to feedback, so that they can receive it, utilize it, and grow from it without being negatively affected?
Yeah. Well, I'm very sensitive to feedback. It's hard, it's very hard to hear criticism. And so, there's a few different things to it. It's like, first of all, it's kind of useless getting feedback from friends and family, because anyone that has a relationship with you is going to consciously or unconsciously not want to hurt your feelings and want to have a good relationship with you and try to be constructive and not give you the real straight dirt on what might not be working that a professional would give you. Like when like if you have an agent, like they're going to be tough because they're not going to send your stuff out unless they believe in it. So you want a tough coach, a tough person who's going to give it to you straight, who knows what they're talking about is the second thing, which most people's friends and family don't because they don't really read screenplays or write or understand story in the way that you need. So it's like seek out people that have that professional ability that don't have a relationship with you, which probably means you have to pay them unless you have some kind of value exchange to offer for their time and expertise. And hopefully they'll give you encouragement and constructive, comments, but you do have to gird yourself for the fact that they may question everything. I'm hoping they're going to just give me the tiniest little notes that I can easily fix, but that almost never happens. So you do have to prepare yourself that they may have major issues with your concept, but you want that because ultimately to grow, you need to hear it and you need to learn how to deal with those things and not just do the little easy notes, but be willing to rethink major elements of your story. So being very open to rethinking and rethinking and rethinking. And you want to hear the biggest notes. You want to hear, I didn't care about the character. I didn't believe what was going on. I couldn't follow it. I was confused or I was bored. Like those big things that you don't want to hear, you really need to seek those out. So people may not say it and they may just try and be constructive and pitch you fixes. But if someone pitches you a fix and you don't know why they're pitching it, you have to get to what they're trying to solve with that fix. Well, why are you pitching that? Are you saying that you didn't think blah, blah, blah? Really force them to reveal what they're really thinking if you can. Hopefully a professional will just do it because they know how to do that. But anytime you're getting feedback, you want to know the biggest things first and be willing to look at the biggest things. That's the only way you're going to really grow. The concept notes, the basic idea of your story, the basic approach to the story. At the same time, no one person's feedback can be something that you have to listen to all of and agree with everything they say. So you ideally get multiple sources of feedback and you're looking for consensus, things that everybody is saying, and or things that even if only one person's saying, you in your heart of hearts believe it's probably true once you get past your defensiveness and your sadness and your outrage and whatever else you might be going through. And sometimes it's hard because some writers tend to take everything to heart and think every criticism is right and I should give up. Other writers are the opposite and think nobody's right but me and I won't do anything anyone says. And there's sort of like a happy medium that's kind of like a hard balance to find where you're open and you really are willing to hear and rethink, but you're not assuming that everybody's thing that they didn't like is true or that you have to, because ultimately it has to come through your voice. So any changes you're going to make, you have to find your way to solve the problem someone points out once you agree that it's a problem. And then do it in your voice. Only use their fix if you like their fix and it fits your voice. Otherwise, you have to go, okay, well, I don't like their fix or they're not offering me one, but I'm going to rethink whatever it is they're saying needs rethinking and eventually come up with something that hopefully you'll like better and the script will be better once you get past the pain of that feedback and realizing, oh, they didn't like it as much as I hoped they would, which sadly is what almost always happens, even at the professional level.
Mm. You're also a mentor for our TV pilot competition. When mentoring a writer with aspiring dreams to get into the industry, what key advice are you looking to give them? You've mentioned that before that you could write, say, maybe Friends or Fraser, but it's changed a bit and now people are writing their own TV pilots. So there are any other key advice that you're giving in terms of breaking into the industry with the mentorships?
I mean, usually the advice has to do with whatever script it is that I'm mentoring them on. Like even a script that wins the contest, chances are somebody like me is still going to have notes on it. I mean, you can sell a script and they're going to still have notes after you sold it. And the first thing you're going to be asked is to rewrite all these things that aren't working, even though you sold it, right? So much of breaking in is about having one script that is like just so above the pack. And so, like I heard someone say, undeniable is a good word, because it's one thing to write a decent, good, competent script. There are a million of those. It's another to write something that people can't put down, can't forget, were moved by, felt like nothing they've ever read, et cetera, et cetera. So most of the mentoring isn't about, here's the advice from a like marketing standpoint or what to do or what to write. It's about how to get to that one script that is that, which is really an elusive goal for most people. So it's about what still is the thing that's in the way of this script that's gotten pretty far, but isn't getting you an agent or manager, or isn't, which is usually what people are trying to get if they don't have that, or they might be trying to get it sold or getting it, having it get them staff jobs on a series or whatever. So most of it's about working on that one script, making that one script better, because there's very little you can tell writers that they don't already know in terms of like, what do you need to succeed? What you need is a one undeniable script and certain qualities as a writer that probably you would have had to write that one undeniable script, meaning the openness to feedback and the understanding and prioritizing of some of these concepts that we talk about what makes something good and all of that. So beyond that, there's just mundane things like, pick a genre that you really care about and are good at it and want to work in and write multiple things in that genre, et cetera, et cetera. But the biggest thing is know that your decent scripts probably aren't enough. And you're not looking for decent scripts. You're looking for something amazing. How do you get to that thing that's amazing? And don't stop till you get to that.
And you mentioned an interesting concept earlier that I think maybe a lot of new writers, first-time TV pilot writers might miss, which is the concept of 3 stories per episode, which means the most successful pilots and episodes usually juggle an A, B, and C episode. Can you just talk a bit more on that structure? And are there any TV shows that successfully demonstrate that structure?
Yeah, A, B, and C story within an episode. Yeah, meaning that it's not just one character and one story. There's multiple things going on at the same time, multiple characters that we're following. So I'm trying to think of a good example that's recent. It's easy to think of old examples. Like if you look at the Friends pilot, everybody's seen the Friends pilot. I know it's 30 some years old, but like the Friends pilot has 3 stories. Ross has a story, Rachel has a story, and Monica has a story. Monica has a date with Paul, the wine guy, that goes in a certain direction, right? Unexpected conflict, whatever. Ross has, his wife left him for another woman, and he's got a crush on Rachel, but he's really depressed about his love life. And Rachel has just left Barry at the altar, and she's trying to figure out her life. Is she going to be independent and cut up her credit cards and not do what daddy wants and move in with Monica and be like these other losers who don't have a trust fund, essentially, right? So there's 3 stories going on in that pilot, and we go back and forth between those 3 stories. The other 3 characters don't have stories in the pilot, Chandler, Phoebe, and Joey, but there's enough introductory material for us to kind of get to know who they are. But they mainly fill out the other people's stories by being the friends of the people with stories and having comedic lines and stuff in their group scenes. So that's a sitcom, but drama series tend to do it the same way. Downton Abbey is a show that had like 10 stories per episode. There's so many characters that you're meeting, even in the pilot, that there's enough of a conflict, enough of a problem. There's probably 3 or 4 main ones, but then there's several other ones that are starting up as well. That it's really just 3 is a little bit of an arbitrary number. It's maybe one of the more common numbers that you have 3 stories in an episode, but plenty of shows have 2, or they have 4, or they have 5. What I'm mainly saying is that it's rare to only have 1. British show like Fleabag only has 1. Like Fleabag, everything is told through her perspective. Or like Baby Reindeer, another British show that I liked a lot, is basically just one main character. It's mainly told just through Richard's perspective. But that's a limited series, or 6 half hours, and then maybe one more season, and that's another 6 half hours, and then it's over. An American TV is moving a little bit more toward that model, where you have like 8 episodes in a season, and then you have a year and a half between seasons. Or like a show like Hacks, which I like a lot. Hacks usually has 2 to 3 stories per episode, because you have Ava and you have what's her name? The two main characters. I'll think of it in a second. The 2 women. Both of them have a story every episode. In other words, if you look at it closely, each one of them has some particular problem or goal that they're dealing with in that episode that we really experience from their perspective. That show will also typically have a story from their manager Jimmy's perspective. some problem or goal from, and sometimes from Marcus, who's like the right-hand business guy for Deborah Vance. So Deborah and Ava. So if you look at it closely, a typical episode, even of that kind of show today, there tends to be 3 or 4 things going on, not just one. So a lot of picking an idea for a series is deciding who are my 3 or 4 characters who are going to consistently get stories, not who is my one main character like a movie.
And another concept I love from you is make your characters miserable because audiences are sadists, which is worrying if that's true. Can you elaborate on why you think this usually works?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I know why psychologically, but I definitely think it's true that we enjoy watching people struggle through difficulties. If you look at almost every show or movie that you like, and that includes reality shows, it's all about conflict. It's all about difficulty. It's all about people that want something that they can't have and other people are in the way and they're trying to move through, they're trying to change or convince or defeat other people. Sports are the same way. I think most good stories are similar to a great sporting event where your team that you're rooting for, or you could say your main character that you're rooting for, is usually behind and they're unlikely to win, but it really matters. It's like the championship game, and like they're behind at the very last second and they have to like win at the last minute. Most of your favorite stories do that same kind of thing. And I don't know why. I think it's just stories are models of human behavior and human striving that we can relate to, and it's a safe way to experience problems and emotion. It's just boring to watch things go well for somebody. You will just start looking at your watch or your phone or whatever if you have too many scenes of people are happy and they're falling in love and they're getting what they want. It's just boring. You can even notice it in conversations, I think. Like when you talk to people, what I've noticed is their difficulties are what's most interesting usually. If someone is telling you about all the good things that happen, you're like, oh, that's so great. And it's like the end of the conversation. But when someone has a problem, even if you're just trying to help them, it's like, oh, let's dig into this problem. Like we just want to solve problems. We want to see people try to solve problems. Maybe it's because life feels like it's full of problems, that some of them are unsolvable or that we're trying to solve, but seeing other people who we're entertained by trying to solve their problems, there's just something about that that is appealing. And so are we sadists? I mean, I'm a little bit overstating it, but it's like you punish your characters because you're trying to give them big problems, and a lot of times scripts fall short on that, where the main character just doesn't have a big enough struggle. They don't have enough against them. They don't have enough in the way of what it is they're trying to do, or they're too easily getting the things that they want. Even if you look at superhero movies, a superhero needs a super villain who's more powerful than they are for 90% of the movie for the movie to work, right? So, or James Bond, like whatever, it's the same thing. There always needs to be forces that seem bigger and more powerful than the main character. And if there aren't, we get bored. So a lot of constructing good story is creating big enough, believable problems and problematic adversaries of some kind for our main characters to have to move through to try to get what they want.
Yeah, I love that. It's a really good thought to bear in mind, especially around what you spoke about earlier, the idea of what conflict is. I want to speak about your feature film, The Elephant in the Room. I love this concept. I just thought it was genius. So the film deals with very current issues. So I want to ask you, how quickly did you finish the script from having the initial idea? And how did that initial idea come about? And how fast was the whole process? Because obviously you finished production now. So I'd love to hear how quick that whole process was.
Wasn't super quick, but it's been 2-3 years. I mean, the movie is about a lonely single progressive woman in December of 2020 who meets a guy she might want to date, but then it turns out he voted for Donald Trump for president twice, and she's totally freaked out by that, and then considers, am I going to try and date him? Am I going to see if I can change his views? And she's being kind of advised reluctantly by her new housemate, who she's also trying to become friends with, and he's not that interested in friendship. So it's these 3 people. And I guess around 2016, like a lot of people, I started, really looking at polarization and that issue, and seeing that as its own problem outside the other problems that I might have opinions about in the world of politics and current events. And like most people, had relationships with people that had opposite views, and like trying to understand each other and trying to not have it just devolve into conflict or not talking. And as somebody that's always like looking for my next idea for a movie, and some of those are romantic comedies, and you need something in the way of the relationship in a romantic comedy, it just at some point it dawned on me that different political views in the age of Donald Trump could be a big enough problem in the way of a relationship, in the way that maybe it wouldn't have been 10 years earlier. So I just started playing around with that idea, decided the female would be the progressive, the male would be the Trump voter, and then, started writing drafts of the script, my usual process. And probably it was, 6 months to a year before I did a read through with some actors, some of whom ended up being in the movie, others didn't, and that gave me insights into things that I needed to do to fix the script. But I kind of just committed that I was going to raise the money to make this one, and that I could do it for 100,000, ended up being 300 when I started with 100, and I could shoot the movie. So I just kind of put together a fundraising plan, and that took over a year, I think. And then we shot the movie, and then it took close to a year in post-production, which are kind of typical time frames, I think, for something on this scale. So, and we just completed the movie in the last 6 months and are starting to have screenings of it now. So it's probably been 3 years total.
And the subject matter of those polarizing views being set sort of in a romantic comedy, so it's sort of it's not combative. Was that an intentional choice on this subject matter to get people to maybe watch this and change their opinion or their views?
Yeah, it's not trying to get people to change their opinions at all. I think it more explores two people dealing with this issue, as opposed to prescribing that viewers should feel a certain way, which I think movies aren't good at, especially scripted movies. People don't watch scripted movies to be changed or to be told what to think. They watch them to be entertained and to be emotionally engaged, which I think this does for a lot of people, not everyone, but then, hopefully there's something to chew on afterwards. And what we have found is people really want to discuss the movie afterwards. We'll have like panels, Q&As after, and a lot of people have a lot of personal experience around this issue. And the movie triggers a lot of thinking and discussion about that, because you have opinions about the two characters, and not only their political views, but how they interact with the person that has the opposite views. And, it may, if anything, I do think polarization is a problem. And I'm hopeful that the movie gets people thinking in a new way about how it's ridiculous, even though it's understandable, that we paint the other side with such a broad brush and sort of condemn and dismiss them all and think that they're all the same, as opposed to seeing people as individuals with complicated views and humanity that maybe have arrived at certain opinions for reasons that make sense to them. It doesn't make them evil or stupid that they disagree with your view of all of that. It's easy to think that, and I think there are forces in society that kind of benefit from us thinking that way, especially media and politicians themselves, who are the most polarizing of all, because it kind of serves their business model. I don't mean it in a necessarily nefarious way. It's just the way the system is set up. But yeah, it's not a movie filled with political arguments. There's a little bit of that, but it's mostly just a soft, funny story about three people who are all sympathetic in their own way, that this is a struggle at the center of this one relationship.
Yeah, and did you think film especially, I think given sometimes how social media can drive certain narratives, do you think film has a unique power to maybe open people up and look at things differently?
I do, yeah, I definitely think that. Film and TV are powerful media for, getting people to see different things in different ways, and different characters and issues presented in a different way. So I certainly do think it's powerful.
I want to move on to ChatGPT and screenwriting, and where you think that sits now and in the future. So many screenwriters are understandably wary about AI tools like ChatGPT, often fearing they'll replace them. Some writers might even be hesitant because of the stigma to say that they actually use ChatGPT. So these tools do exist. I wanted to ask you, in your view, what's the smartest and most productive ways screenwriters can use ChatGPT at the moment?
Yeah. Well, I just discovered recently what some of what it can do, what ChatGPT can do that's helpful. I mean, we all use technology and tools that are helpful. Of course, you can always fear the future and who knows what the future holds. But right now, ChatGPT isn't replacing screenwriters that I know of. But I find it especially useful for research because a lot of times anything I'm writing, I don't know enough about certain things to be able to write it really convincingly. And ChatGPT can just spit out answers and explanations in a conversational, ongoing way that's so much more useful than just like Google searching a topic where you have to wade through different sites that were written by one person because it's combining all this knowledge. So, for instance, like I'm writing a character who's an aspiring pop star, and I know nothing about how like young women who become pop stars, how they use TikTok and at what point do they do live showcases or get a manager and how that publishing deals for songwriting work. I don't really know anything about that. So I just start asking it questions and it just gives me this incredibly concise and useful answer that I can follow up on any single thing that it says to go deeper into what's useful for me. It also does it in a very encouraging thing, it always says, great question. You're really onto something with this, I'm a sucker for that every time. I'm never going to turn on the version that's tougher because I need the stroking, but really it's like lightning speed help with things you want to understand better about the world, which screenwriters always need that. It can also give you ideas, but the ideas may or may not be that useful. If you're like, I want an idea for a scene or dialogue, I hardly ever use it for that. So I'll use it sometimes for things that I'm like a little weak on, like for instance, introductory scene description of like somebody's bedroom that's supposed to like give a sense of that character. Like I've sometimes had it come up with something that I can use pieces of, like it'll give a few lines of description. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good, but I'll change it a little. But you can actually upload your script to ChatGPT and it will give feedback. And I found the feedback is pretty decent. Like, and you can upload multiple drafts and it can compare drafts. It's not as great at that as it is at just reading one, because sometimes it will make mistakes in comparing things. But for the most part, it's pretty good at like understanding what it is you're going for and giving you help. Another thing I'm using it for is just ideas about distribution for my film, ideas about places that might want to do impact screenings of the film or how to do an impact screening campaign. It knows all about everything, practically. And so I just use it for more for concrete information as opposed to like creativity. Although I'm sure you can also use it to help you in the creative side of the process, like literally creative ideas for scenes and characters and stories. I haven't used it for that at all, really, but maybe I will at some point.
Yeah, you mentioned in your blog that you named ChatGPT as your best writing friend. And from what you described there, I can understand the things that's really useful for. But you've also said that the heart and soul of great storytelling still has to come from the writer. So can you just say, someone maybe without obviously your experience, a new writer, are there specific things they should be looking to use it for versus things to avoid? And when you say the heart and soul of great storytelling still comes from the writer, what that actually looks like?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't think there's anything to avoid necessarily. There's nothing that I'm like fearing or thinking, don't use it for this, don't use it for that. Maybe I'm naive, but I just don't tend to approach things like that super like cynically and like doom and gloom about the future, even though we don't know. I mean, it may be able to write a screenplay as good or better as a human. I wouldn't doubt that maybe someday it could. I just think for right now, it's not nearly there. Um and so it can give you ideas and suggestions and can comment on the ones you come up with, but at the end of the day, you're the one that has to come up with the stuff we talked about, like, your own voice, your own interest, your own obsessions, the thing that makes you unique as a writer, which is an important thing to look at, your voice, all the elements that make up your voice, and your unique characters you come up with based on people you've known or aspects of your personality, the situations you put them in, the way, I mean, things that are a little more concrete are easier for it to give you additional ideas for. Like if you give it a specific task, like give me some options for what this character could do or say in this situation. But the basic idea and the basic approach to what you're writing and how you evolve it, I think is going to be unique to you. And you just have to trust that and recognize that, tools like AI can assist you in that and see them that way rather than as like threats.
Erik, thank you so much. I've just realized the time. That went so quickly. I just absorbing everything. Thank you. I'll quickly do just a quick outro just to finish, but I wanted to say thank you so much. It's been incredible speaking to you. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erik, for sharing your insights with us today. I'm sure all the writers that are listening will find your advice extremely valuable. And for writers who want to learn more from you, where's the best place to find you online? And can you just share what kinds of coaching, consulting, and other services you're currently offering?
Yeah, I have a website. It's called flyingwrestler.com. I know it's a weird name, and it explains why it's called that on one of my blog posts, flyingwrestler.com. Or if you just Google my name, you would find me pretty quickly. So I do offer consulting and coaching. I mean, the typical consulting is I'll either read a complete script or I'll read just a one-page synopsis or something in between and give feedback, written and or verbal feedback. I also have coaching packages, which are multi-round packages where I'm helping you as you're developing an idea into beat sheet, outline, script, multiple phases of that for a more ongoing relationship. So I offer both of those. And I also have an online community that has a course based on my book, The Idea, and it has discussion boards and weekly live sessions that you can sign up for as well on different topics with me, interactive sessions, and I blog. I have a lot of blog posts on there as well, and my book. But all that stuff you can find through that website, flyingwrestler.com.
Amazing. Thanks, Erik. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sophie.
Great to chat
Great
to you.
talking to you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Erik. Bye.